Excuse me. Okay, we pick up right where we left off yesterday with our marvelous brain-like description of a theater. Let's light speed through some review and get to where we left off. First of all, we talked about the Greek theater and how it evolved from what? What's it important to understand is that the foundation of Greek theater, Alex? A choir, which means what art form? Music. It evolves from music. And what is the context of this music? So two important facts to remember. Music in what context? That's right, religion. Music in a religious context, if you understand that, you'll understand a lot of what might seem strange on the page in front of you. We learned about this chorus, which holds the roles of exposition, summary, and importantly, commentary on the events in the play. 12 to 15 people. How they represent people, the city, elders, in Medea, the women of the city. We learned how one person stood out from the chorus, enacted a role, became the protagonist, then the deuteragonist, and then the tritagonist. We learned how these three are separate individuals. So when you read something like Antigone, you will not see somebody who is here and then steps out and becomes an individual. No, this person is always separate. So in the evolution of theater, there was the migration, but at this point in the history of theater, these people are separate actors, and they obey sort of separate rules from the chorus. We, what were we here? We had, what are these structures? Amphitheaters. They do have one at the zoo. That is correct. Your best example, if I can spell correctly, your best example in the Toledo area is the Toledo Zoo Amphitheater. You can see these, of course, in Greece and Rome, but you can see them peppered throughout Europe as the Romans took Greek architecture and seeded it throughout northern Europe. Some of your best examples of amphitheaters will be found in other European nations. Some very intact examples of Roman architecture. But what's important for our purposes, of course, is that we take a look at the structure, and all this scribbling was my discussion of, wow, look, telling the story in reverse. Telling the discussion of how we had this open area here in which the action took place. The altar, of course, is the religious core. We talked about the skene and how the three actors enter and exit the skene for the scene changes. We talked about how the proskenion is the place where modern-day actors stay, and they, of course, have left behind the musicians in the orchestra section. And what does the skene represent in the story? I'm sorry, Blake? That's how it's functionally used. Paige? What type of building specifically would they be? Temple, city palace. In Medea, it would be her house. Medea is strange in a number of ways. Antigone and Agamemnon are much more traditional examples of Greek tragedy. No. What? Strange is good. All right. Let's talk about this. What is this? Artist representation of what? That's right. And what does it do? Come on, Adriana. And who would those people? Actors representing gods. Very good. It's okay. So that would be a god lowered into the action from a crane. And you're right. So it appears that they are flying down from Mount Olympus. When in the story do you expect this would happen? When would a god or goddess enter the story? Brienne. Why at the end? That's right. Here's basically what happens. Human beings fight, conflict, find themselves in all sorts of trials and troubles. Eventually it reaches such a fever pitch toward the climax that nobody can see a way out of it until Apollo descends from Olympus and says, hey, I'm going to solve everything. Bingo, play's over. We have a modern day term from this, and it actually relates to this thing right here. The modern day term Deus Ex Machina. Deus. Deus is the Latin term for God. Deus Ex Machina, Deus out of the machine, or God from the machine. You want to be a sophisticated college-level analyst of literature. You might be sitting there saying, no, I don't. Yeah, you're sitting in that chair, and you'll be sitting in Mr. Moffat's seats next year, so you do. A Deus Ex Machina is a term in literary study. A Deus Ex Machina refers to a plot event at the end of a narrative that just sort of improbably and magically solves all the conflicts. Somebody comes in at the last second and rescues everybody. And it owes its derivation from this strange mechanical device in ancient Greek theater, where a god would be lowered in to save the day. You do not see a Deus Ex Machina in Antigone. You don't see one in Agamemnon. You do see one in Medea. So those of you reading Medea, look for the Deus Ex Machina toward the end, and look for a place where you think they would use this ancient device to lower or carry somebody into the sky as if they were flying, because it happens in that play. This, by the way, is considered a weakness in writing. If a writer cannot resolve conflicts that he himself has created, then that writer is considered a weak writer. If they need some sort of improbable saving angel at the end, that's considered a cheap move. Yes? Some. And probably, most likely Aristotle, who wrote theory on tragedy as well as critique tragedy, holds up Sophocles as being, he considers Sophocles and Oedipus the King to be the paragon of Greek tragedy. And he would probably find fault with somebody like Euripides. But that's a matter of taste. Some people are going to look at Euripides and Medea and say, wow, it's a fascinating text just because of all the strange problems it presents. So when you read Medea, you're going to see a lot of strangeness and confusion. And then something like Antigone, written by Sophocles, will be much more straightforward and form following, if you will. But yeah, some people do find fault with it. All right, we talked about these things. What do you remember about our discussion regarding masks? Yeah, Reba. That's right. Some of them seem to amplify voices. So we have found ancient examples of amplification devices. Tegan. Large and expressive. There is no doubt, even from a distance, that those people on the right-hand side of the screen are sad. They're wearing their sadness rather loudly. And people from the far way off can see that. What else do masks enable? Excellent. You wouldn't associate one actor with one character. You'd associate an actor with a number of characters. Huron, did you have something else to add? Okay. Anything else? Blake. That's correct. So it enables the cross-dressing that seems to fascinate high school students so much. I'm serious. Out of everything you remember from Shakespeare, one fact will stay with you for the rest of your life. The guys played girls, and they kissed, and it was weird. All right. I don't believe we went here yesterday. Who's that? Not Medusa. I know it kind of looks snakish, but that's hair. No, it's not Helen. That's a guy. See? Here, guy. Not Apollo. Come on. Oedipus. This is a representation of one of the Greek gods. I'm talking about Greek theater. Which Greek god was the patron god of the festivals? What? Dionysus. Dionysus is the Greek god of what? Let's think about an agrarian society. Which time of year would be the happiest time, the time at which you would celebrate, the time at which you would have everything necessary to throw a big party? Harvest time. The end of summer, fall. Dionysus is the god of this time. The god of the time in which you have plenty of food and drink, at which you have just harvested everything. Everybody's living in plenty. This is not the winter time where everything is scarce. So Dionysus is the god of this time, and basically the god of plenty, the god of the party, if you will. Anybody know the Roman name? Sometimes students know Greek myths. Bacchus is the name of the same god in Roman mythology. The Romans basically stole the gods and sometimes renamed them. Greek theater was presented at Dionysian festivals. Festivals could last days. And at those festivals, playwrights would bring plays. Who paid for them? The cities. The state paid for them. So these are state-sponsored. An important and interesting fact, and a difference from today's art. So today we might have grants from the government, but the state's sponsoring these plays. A playwright would bring how many? 4 plays for competition. The 4-play set is called a what? A tetralogy, composed of 3 tragedies and 1 satyr play. Okay, so you've got these Dionysian festivals, which are both parties and religious observances at the same time. Convenient, isn't it? So you have these large festivals at which entertainment is provided, and that entertainment is this somewhat entertaining, somewhat religious expression of theater. It kind of looks like a religious observance because you've got people up there in robes singing. At the same time, it's an entertaining stories, and actors are acting, and sometimes they're funny, and sometimes they're tragic. Basically, it's your ancient version of watching movies that happen at these festivals honoring the god Dionysus. Blake? Go ahead. Yes. Not off topic at all. Satyr plays provided ridicule of society. They were critical of society, and that's how we derive our modern term of satire. That is correct. Let's do some other language work. I love working with language, as you can probably tell, seeing as my profession as English teacher. The adjective form of Dionysus. What do you think if I call something Dionysian, or I say those acts are Dionysian, what am I saying about them? Catherine? They're festive. Excellent. We're getting close. Possibly flamboyant. Reba? Not religious. Because Dionysus would be a specific god, not just representative of all gods. Dionysian actually refers to the component of ourselves that is irrational, that is associated with appetite, that is associated with mood, emotions, love, hate. Dionysian aspects of our character, if somebody uses that term Dionysian, they're referring to all of those aspects that have a lot less to do with sense and rationality and a lot more to do with partying. Second word. The word bacchanalian. I know you're looking at that and saying, okay, now you're just over the line, Clarkson. These are real terms that people use outside of their Greek context. In other words, they don't have to be talking about Greek gods and goddesses to say something is Dionysian. In fact, one of the greatest philosophers of Western philosophy, Friedrich Nietzsche, that you might have heard that term before, he talked about Dionysian aspects of our character. Bacchanalian is an adjective that refers to something being extraordinarily, no, not annoying. How do I want to say this? over-the-top party festive style. People growing out of control. Yeah, good. The rave sort of atmosphere. You could call that bacchanalian. A party that is extraordinarily energized. I have no idea if these guys actually look like that. I'm sure the sculptors didn't even know if they looked like that. But so the sculptors' representations of the three most famous Greek tragedians, and by most famous I mean the guys whose work we have. Very little survives, but we have complete plays, intact plays from these three playwrights, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Aeschylus, writer of Agamemnon. Sophocles, writer of Antigone. And Euripides, writer of Medea. Now, what do we say differed from these playwrights from their modern-day counterparts? How are they different sorts of people, different sorts of responsibilities? Tim? Oh, they probably did take part in it. You're right. Yes. They directed. They choreographed. They picked out the actors. They did do the casting. And it's most likely that they composed music as well. So these people were totally responsible for the entire product, possibly down to the point of interacting. So when you see Sophocles' words in Antigone, I want you to realize that those words are merely one portion of what he was responsible for in producing this art. Of these three, who has produced the trilogy that still survives to this day? Lance. Aeschylus. Come on, the entire class now. Aeschylus. Yeah, like escalator. That's excellent. There you go. The Oresteia is the name of the trilogy. Why? From the character Orestes. Anybody know who Orestes is the son of? You're looking at me like I'm... Thank you. He's the son of Agamemnon. Looking at me like I'm crazy, but I'm looking at you like you're crazy because some of you have started reading Agamemnon and probably have already seen the word Orestes because that is his son. So Agamemnon, that those of you who are reading it have already started, that's part one of a trilogy that we have. So if you wanted to read part 2 and part 3, in fact, a student in period 3 has already finished it and said, Mr. Clarkson, it doesn't seem to end. It seems like it's right in the middle of the action. I said, I know. That's because part 2 follows directly after. It's a famous story in which Orestes, the son, is faced with the choice to kill his mother because his mother has killed his father. Oh, don't worry about it. That's the magic and power of Greek tragedies are not necessarily predicated upon the surprise, because everybody reading them on a college level probably already knows the story before they start reading. So you're not really ruining anything by giving it away. All right, so we have these. We have 3 plays from Sophocles all based on Oedipus, Oedipus the King, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone, but they're not an intact trilogy in the same way. Are there any facts that you read about that you would like to discuss? Anything that I've not addressed that you had questions regarding? So those are the basic facts that I consider to be highlights and most important touchstones of understanding Greek tragedy. You've read a lot more details, and that helps make your understanding full, but I didn't want to take a lecture to go over every single detail in those web resources. Do you have anything to bring to me? Questions? Concerns? Interesting facts? No? Good enough.